Major support for these broadcasts is provided by the CUNY TV Foundation, New York Community Bank, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's window company, Capital One Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Geneva Burns, Gian Tomasi and Webster, M&T Bank, the Wyckoff Group, Chelsea Lighting, Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Additional support is provided by Ackman Ziff Real Estate, AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi, USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Colliers International, NYC, Cushman & Wakefield, DDG, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Eastern Union Funding, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Herrick Feinstein LLP, Hersha Hospitality Trust, Investors Bank, New Banks, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, John Katzimatidis, Red Apple Group, Margolin Weiner and Evans, Madison Realty Capital, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, People's United Bank, Popular Community Bank, SJP Properties, Sterling & Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, Urban American, and these friends.
They call it the East End. No, it's not East End of Manhattan. They call it the East End of Long Island. And it's called the North Fork. And there's lots of things going on there. They make wine. They bank people. They have the best medical center out there. They have, building supply. They do a lot out there. So as opposed to me being the New York City kid who once in a while goes out there, I'm going to have the deans, the gurus, talk about what's happening in the North Fork and the East End. My guests today include Charles Massoud, who is the principal, the owner of Pominock Vineyards, which we'll talk about in a little while. Okay, always good to have a banker. We have Michael Orsino, who is the executive vice president and chief lending officer of Suffolk County National Bank. Then we have a little building. We have Edgar Goodale, who is the principal of Riverhead Building Supply. And last but not least, the guy who takes care of the health out there, my friend Andy Mitchell, who's the CEO of Peconic Bay Medical Center and Affiliates. So how's the business out in the East End and North Fork? We'll ask the businessman before we know the healthcare business is doing okay.
Business over the last 12 months has been improved dramatically over the last 4 to 5 years before that. The recession was very deep where we were, and there was not a lot going on. But we've seen a pretty good-sized turnaround in the last 12 months. There's a lot of home building, second home building that's going on in the East End of Long Island, both on the North Fork, more so on the South Fork.
So here's a question. You say there's home building going on, and needless to say, you can build homes, but the only way you can build homes is you have to have the money. So I got the man with the money. How willing are you and your other competitors to providing financing on a market which Edgar basically said before was a little difficult for 4 or 5 years, and now it's recovering a little bit?
Well, Edgar, he serves the luxury home market, so in many cases they procure their own financing based on, I always view the East End and the North Fork as very connected to New York City. So they have their contacts in New York, and as well as a lot of them could self-fund some of the high-end luxury homes.
Now, with regard to that, because there are, I remember a couple years ago in the Riverhead area, and then they changed the name of the other town. How'd they come up with Aberqua?
Ackelborg.
How'd that come up? Riverhead to me.
Ackelborg came before Riverhead. Ackelborg's an old Indian name.
But they had more of a tract housing. I mean, they weren't tract housing, but they were building some tract housing.
Yeah, on the North Fork, and as you're talking about in Ackelborg, there was a little bit more, you could say, tract housing or McMansion type homes that happened in the Riverhead area. And further east on the North Fork and on the South Fork is a completely different market, for people who are using them for second homes and vacation homes.
Now, what about, one of the items which really took place, and I know none of us are over 55, so I don't have to worry about it. The over 55 homes, has that happened? Have we seen a big development out there in the North Fork and the East
In a
End?
big way, yeah.
Yeah.
Big way. I think in Riverhead there's quite a bit. As a matter of fact, at the hospital, I served with Andy at the hospital. It has become a substantial part of our service area, that community.
When we did our first strategic plan, and Charles will remember this since he's the chair of strategic planning on the board of the hospital,
Right.
there were 2,000 plus units in construction in 1 year alone, 55 and older.
Right.
We were watching a 25 to 30% increase in the 55 and older population, which obviously was driving
Now,
huge.
was this full-time residents
Yes.
or part-time
Now
residents?
these were retirement homes. These were people that were moving from Queens, Nassau County, Western Suffolk, who didn't go to Florida or the Carolinas. They decided, for largely family reasons, they didn't want to be away from the children. They were going to move to affordable East End housing.
Okay, and that, I remember that was in Manorville. Okay, you had a couple where Pulte had built and WCI Communities
Absolutely.
had built, where Jan Berman had got the zoning approvals over there, that you had a couple of major developments, and then the 55 has really quieted down a little bit.
Yes,
At
although
this time it has, yeah.
we're starting to see some increase in that again.
So now my question is, when did wine come out? I mean, I am sitting here with a Merlot, a 2008, which is poured in La Bernardin, okay?
Yeah, that's, well, Long Island.
And this one, Chardonnay, come on, take the good credit, another fine wine. So how did wine come out there, and how did the guy...
We owe it to a young couple. When they started, they were 24 years old, Alec and Louisa Hargrave, who pioneered the beginning of the industry out there. The point is, Long Island has an amazing soil and microclimate, both of which are needed to make good wines. And that combination, with the proximity to the New York City marketplace, is an amazing thing, which is why you have today what is seen as a very successful wine industry on Long Island.
What effect has the wine industry had with regard to the building supply business, the medical, the healthcare industry, and the financing in the North Fork?
I think from a financing standpoint, it was the other businesses that grew around the wine industry. So there were a lot of service industries, restaurants, service-type businesses that really started up as a result, with more and more people coming out and visiting. So
Your family has been out in Riverhead for how many years?
For generations.
For
many
generations,
yeah.
okay. You're
Actually, all of my colleagues, none of us was from the East End. We all came to winemaking because we all like to drink good wines. And we figured we're going to make great wines until we started. And then we said, now what do we do? But I think what's very forgiving is really the geography of the place. And today, I mean, it has gone beyond what we ever imagined.
what I put it, in a manner, it's like the Napa Valley of the East Coast.
Except for the fact that we're very small.
Correct. You don't have as large of a proximity and
Right.
an area to grow, but you happen to have, I mean, many of the places have built these large wine tasting and even catering facilities.
Correct.
And, a lot of people want to go out there, for doing weddings and other situations. It's a destination. It's become a destination wedding or a destination party event over there. And I think part of what has happened, and I've seen it like in Riverhead, with the Hyatt Hotel in Riverhead and some of the other planned hotels. And somebody said, who's going to go out to a hotel? I mean, and what has happened with Tangers and what we were talking about before, what's happening on 58?
Yeah.
I mean,
You see, the North Fork, think of it as the last frontier on the East End. It is the one place which is still pristine, very rural. The vineyards look beautiful in the summer. The wine is very much the beverage of choice today. And all of that is a draw. And so you have a lot of people coming.
Don't worry, we may open it up, the bottle soon. The taste, you know. But no, I think it's truly there. How do you?
Just to add to that, I think as people have discovered the North Fork and the East End as a whole, the transformation that you mentioned, Mike, on Route 58, which for all practical purposes has become the main road through Riverhead, has been nothing short of just astounding. We were kidding around earlier. I don't think there's a big box in America that is not either being built or is already there on Route 58. People come from 25 miles to these stores.
Right, and they're being absorbed. I mean, these stores are busy. I mean, the Tanger Center is packed all the time.
The new Super Walmart, 200,000 square feet of construction.
So here's the question. You have turned around an institution. What changed? Because when I looked at the financials a couple years ago of, and at that time it wasn't called Peconic Bay.
Central Suffolk.
Central Suffolk Hospital, not medical center and affiliates. It was a different thing. What turned the hospital around besides the fact of a great manager like yourself, and that I've heard from many people, including all the people over here, but what changed this? Was it the growth of the businesses, of the housing business? Was it the hospitality business? Was it
It was everything. It was everything, and it's not one person, it's not one thing. Certainly the population growth that was occurring and all the new housing that was going up, and the fact that this was year-round residents. It's not like the South Fork where people come out for the summer and it's hard to sustain programs year-round. The growth that occurred in such a short period of time in Riverhead created an opportunity for Central Suffolk, now Peconic Bay, to organically turn itself around. That wasn't the case in a lot of hospitals in New York. You know as well as I do how many hospitals have closed over the last decade. Then it was a recognition that if the board was willing to accept a very bold vision, which meant undertaking a huge amount of debt and moving forward with surgical programs and facilities.
We're also looking that you're opening up, because what's happened today with day surgery and people getting out of the hospital and everything being done, like we joke when you were on my other show, with 23 hours, that's why you're opening up a major facility in Manorville.
Correct.
And Manorville, it's interesting because Manorville is that stop that many people get off that exit 70. And in reality, Manorville hasn't really, the shopping hasn't really grown.
No, you're in the middle of nowhere.
But there's a reason for that.
Okay.
There's a reason for that. And I'll let one of my colleagues explain it, but it's something called the Pine Barrens. Well, I just want to finish on Manorville for a second since you brought it up. The other piece of this equation, and I talked about in the last show, and it's so important to this story of Peconic Bay, was the support from the community and the philanthropy. Manorville wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the File family.
But Manorville, you look at it this way, that Manorville is like, I hate to say, the town of Riverhead, central town of Riverhead. You have such great roots. Every time my wife and I drive in and we go to Tweed's or we go over there, or the Greek restaurant, and you see that, and you have the water over there, and you have the cute town. Okay, even though they just renovated the theater, they don't have the right. At West Hampton, they have better entertainment. They haven't been able to grow the town properly.
I think that's a combination of the business folks and the local politicians getting together and working together as they're doing in Patchogue. They're going through a complete renaissance.
Mike, I think you're right on the situation. It's interesting that they allowed this to expand with the wine business over there. Somebody could say, oh, we have too much. We shouldn't build any more roads, And even, where you are in Peconic Bay, I mean, you've grown so large over there. And what you've done in Riverhead, because you're not only in Riverhead, you have 10 locations, but I have no idea how you ended up in Rhode Island. But that's a separate subject.
It was an island.
Okay, it was an island. So
But if you think about the 5 towns that make up the East End and North Fork, East Hampton, Southampton, Riverhead, Shelter Island, and I know I missed one in there, at some point they need to work together, because if you look at the whole community, with all the traffic and everything that's going on there, if they don't have one vision,
but
I don't know how it'll
we
work
were
together.
talking about this about West Hampton, where I have a summer place. They don't let any development. And you know, what's happening in Greenport? It's a beautiful area, but the amount of development there has been limited over the years, right?
Greenport, 20 years ago, you wouldn't touch it. It was, like we talk about Andy and his leadership in Riverhead, it was David Coppell,
Yes.
who was the mayor in Greenport, who turned it around from being a drug trading area to being the beautiful place
Destination that it is.
One man, you know, it took one man, and he made a lot of enemies, but he turned the town around to what it is today.
And I think what you said before, and I've had the mayor of Patchogue on my show, and you know what he did, and Tullio Bertoli, and you know it's a vision, and you know you need that vision.
And there's no shortage, and I really have to say this, there's absolutely no shortage of visionaries and entrepreneurs on the East End. We sell ourselves short. I mean, Charles came out there after the Hargraves, coming out of an IBM career, and now is one of the finest wineries in New York State.
Give me better. I've heard in the country.
In the country.
I don't want to, you know.
Edgar has evolved a family building supply into an incredible business today that
With over 500 employees.
Yeah.
I mean, he only
his
has
facility out
23.
in
We have no idea.
Calverton the milling facility out in Calverton is one of the highest tech
But
things
you
I've
know
ever
what?
seen.
It relates. You know, you talk about Calverton. Look at what they've done by holding back. You know, I forgot who the developer on the psychiatric Central State Psychiatric.
Central, yes.
That they don't want to allow that.
Centralized.
I mean, I had Alan Rose on my show, and he said, you know, he finally was able to do something in Yapok. He said, it's lucky that I'm 83 years of age because it only took 40 years to get approval and development to get there. So I can see that the world is changing, you know? But, so what do you see in the future in the market with regard to business?
As was stated before, that he said that the east end of Long Island evolves around the central metropolitan area of New York City. And as New York City will go, I believe that the politics and the area of the East End will always try to be what it is today with some slow, sustained growth and to keep those values. But as New York City goes, Eastern Long Island goes.
That's true.
But you know, I'm seeing something that's very interesting. I don't know if it's a trend, but it's very intriguing. You get people who are professionals. They move over there because they like the beauty of the space, and they work there, but they're connected electronically. So they don't have to physically commute anymore. They're connected by the electronic umbilical cord. My next door neighbor, who's a graphic artist, his customers are in Switzerland.
The world
And
has
he's working
changed.
from his home.
You know, in the same way in banking today, you know, people say, you know, I was walking over here before, and there's a new hotel being built on 44th Street or 45th Street, and I see another TD sign. I mean, TD, you know, has to have more locations and all these situations. But banking today, it's remote capture. Okay,
Absolutely.
the checks that go to your place, the checks that go to the hospital, you don't need to have a branch next door. There's no need today. The
Your
world,
cell phone now.
okay, you could take the
needs
picture on,
checks?
right. You don't
Who
need
needs
the check.
checks?
But what I'm saying is that's the world, and the electronics has changed. The negative of going out to the North Fork and the East End happens to be the Long Island Expressway is not getting any better. They're not widening it to 5.5 lanes. You know, it's
That's
so
a
you have the challenge is over there, and you know when people know it. You have to know it's 2 hours to the city, no matter what, you know. And East Hampton, I love the people who tell me, I made them 1 hour and 35 minutes, and I said, that's 3.5 hours for me. Okay, but you know, there's an interest.
They went by helicopter.
Okay, so how do you see the banking business? Now, besides the builders, are there new entrepreneurs opening up? Do you see, you know, we know that the vineyards and the wine business is established, it's there. Do you think there'll be more new people opening?
You know, we haven't seen major new transaction. What's happening is a consolidation.
Right, but
people are buying each other rather than buying new property and expanding.
Do you lend to, okay, because there are different businesses, you know, and banking, you know, you have to be conservative. How do you look at lending on his type of business?
We were talking about that driving in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and basically there's specialty lenders to lend to wine producers and vineyards.
Right.
So it's something that they're better off going to Farm Credit as an example.
Oh, that's right, the Farm Credit Agency and other things.
So they would benefit, the client would benefit, but much more so. So
Who are your customer base? What are they? The builders? Are they the retailers?
it's, you know, the East End and North Fork is a totally different market from the rest of Long Island. And it is a very, very service-driven, and as we've talked about, construction, lending, real estate developers. So with the real estate developers and the residential home builders, there's all the subcontractors. So there's a lot of construction and contractor lending that goes on out there to the subs, such as the plumbers and the electricians and so forth. So that's there.
I would add one more, Mike, if I could. You know, we have seen so much growth of medical offices and medical office
And they're building right now on 58.
We finance some of those as well.
You know, also Long Island is an engine. It's an economic engine. There are lots of entrepreneurs who are doing all sorts of weird things that you may not have heard of, but they need financing. And I think those are also becoming major prospects for small banks, small community banks, because the big banks, they really don't want to do those businesses. They'd rather concentrate on big transactions. And so the community banks, because of the network of...
But that
we
brings
fill
up
in.
an interesting situation. Since you supply the builders, are you seeing some young builders coming out to the
Yes,
East End?
yes, absolutely. The builders, the term builders has changed over the last 20 years, and it's no longer the fellow with the hammer and the saw, but it's maybe somebody with a vision who knows what they want to build and knows what they can sell in the marketplace, and then he will hire the contractors and stuff to build his vision. And that's the builders, that's the luxury home builders today out on the East End who build a high quality home.
What are you lacking? What do you need to grow even better? All of, you know, for looking at for the East End and North Fork, what kind of businesses, what type of engine? I mean, at one time there was the discussion of casino gambling over there, which I don't believe is going to happen now because of the governor saying he wants to do it in Suffolk, in upstate New York.
I think healthcare has a lot of opportunity, although with
Obamacare.
We're talking about Obamacare. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainties, but between the hospitals, the medical groups, assisted living, nursing, so there's opportunity in that space, but you really have to understand it.
Especially as the population continues to age.
Exactly.
I mean, we're a decade, I've been at the hospital now for 12 years, so it's a little more than a decade later. That population that was 55 moving into those new 55 and olders are now getting ready for assisted living. That's the next thing that has to be built, and it will be built.
I remember I think it was in Port Jeff that they were building a CCCR.
Correct.
I don't know what happened to it.
Well, the one is there, and that's Jefferson Ferry. The second one got hit by the recession, so that didn't occur, and that's actually something we're looking at today. The hospital owns 44 acres of property in Eastport, not too far from next town over, really, from West Hampton.
Right.
And we believe either assisted living or a CCCR type facility makes sense.
Explain to my audience, since I know what a CCR is.
It's a planned community retirement community where for an initial fee you purchase your long-term care and your housing in one contract. So from the time you enter the facility in independent living to the time that you move through assisted and ultimately end up in a nursing home,
Progressive care.
progressive care, and
And as long as they have some good wine nearby, they're okay.
and they'll live long if they drink the red wine.
Exactly.
Yeah. But you know, in addition to all that, what we see also, and again, we don't know if it's a trend but the specialty business. For example, we have a cheesemaker now in Bridgehampton. There's a cheesemaker in the town of Southall. Russell McCall is growing Charolais beef, grass-fed beef, which is absolutely delicious. So businesses like that are springing up out of nothing, and what they all have in common is higher quality. So there's a gentrification going on, whereby the North Fork used to be the poorest place in the country
You mentioned
years
Sweet's
ago.
Restaurant.
Organic.
We're probably the only hospital that has its own vineyard on its property And then 2 blocks north, there's a bison farm.
Bison Farm. But you know what's interesting? You know, Stony Brook, who you have an affiliation with, who is really a tech center.
Yes.
But they're not out that far yet. But they, you know, and
They're trying.
They're trying, and
They're trying.
I think didn't
There's
they
an
take over Southampton College?
Yeah,
the
that didn't
facility?
really work out. What they have on the North Fork is a incubator, a business incubator that's now becoming an agricultural incubator as well. And there's another piece to the North Fork that we haven't touched on, and that is and Charles may not appreciate this as much, the agri-entertainment business. I mean, the pumpkin picking in the fall, which clogs the roads, the coming out to pick your own, and all of that.
Wait a second. That all helps. It helps people because if they're picking pumpkins, so they'll also come by. You know?
drives-
There's
drives a
no,
lot of
there's no
different
question that it's a boon economically speaking, because they bring, you know, any time somebody is driving in, they're going to spend some money before they drive back out.
Right.
And therefore,
And it's going to help the hospitality industry.
Yeah.
It's going to help the restaurants. It's going to help the building. And I think all of this is the fuel.
but I mean, you get farms today. I mean, in the old days, it was truck farming. You just had 100 acres of potatoes, shipped them someplace and done. Today, it's specialty farming. Because the
Organic.
people are coming to buy individually. They're picking their little thing, and the produce is very high quality and very nutritious. And so that's what I'm trying to say, that we're seeing now more at a retail level what used to be at the wholesale level, and there's a improvement in quality. And I think that's part of what I call the gentrification.
I'm waiting to see the farmers market in front of Peconic Bay Medical Center.
Actually, in July, we hold a farmer's market in the lobby.
Look, there's no question. So I think for my audience, you know, there is great hope and there's great development taking place on the North Fork and the East End. And I'm fortunate that I had the king of wines over here with these two wonderful products over here, Charles, Mike, Edgar, and my friend Andy. And I'll see you next week.